Excellent. Well, welcome. If you weren't here with us last week was an amazing week. By the way, my name is Chris. I'm the lead pastor here at Hoboken Grace. And last week, we walked through our midpoint of our home initiative, and we're going to announce the results of last week. But we were incredibly encouraged and really excited to be able to share those with you. We're not announcing them this week because some people are still making those commitments. As a matter of fact, if you weren't able to be here last week and you still want to be able to make that commitment, we have our basket down here in the front, and we also have our home station set up in the corner, and you can do that today as we continue to look at, how do we build this community center inside of Hoboken? Not a temple, not another church building, but a tool from which we're able to love and impact our community. And there's so many different ways where we realize this is so important. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but right now here at Hoboken Grace, our kids are in the hallway on the second floor. And our team has done an amazing job. Let's celebrate our Grace Kids team and what they've done. I mean, they have done an incredible job with that space, but the reality is that no one will allow us to rent the classrooms above us. And because of the fact that we don't have our own space, this is the situation that we find ourselves in. It's incredibly, incredibly important. So I hope that you have stepped into this journey with us as we look to make this a reality. So we're coming out of last week, which was incredibly exciting. And then in a couple weeks, we're walking into the biggest celebration of the year as we look at Easter and as we prepare for Easter. But we've got a couple of weeks in between here. And I like to be able to take weeks in between series because of the fact that it allows us to be able to just speak to things that are happening inside of our church family or things that maybe have arisen that we feel like, we need to really work through and talk through this. And many of you have heard us talk over the last couple of weeks about how we want to bring our family back together on Easter and all that we're doing to do that. We've never had 7 services for Easter before. And when we introduced the idea to our team, it was a bit overwhelming when they first began to wrestle through it, but our teams have responded so well in preparing for that and getting ready for Easter. But I want to talk to you today, before we get there, I want to talk to you today about what's driving that. Why do we keep saying we want to bring our family back together? And to do that, what I want to do is I want to challenge a little bit the way that you think about church, because the way that you think about church is not only going to change or impact the way that you engage church, but it's also going to impact the way in which you invite others to engage church. And to do that, what I want to do is I want to take you to a conversation that Jesus has with a woman. She's actually a Samaritan woman. The Jews and the Samaritans didn't get along. They didn't like each other. The Jews really looked down on the Samaritans. But Jesus finds himself in the midst of this conversation. And the reason why I want to take you to this conversation is because I want for you to understand how it is that Jesus primarily talked about him and our dependence on him, not just inside this passage, but as he referenced himself. And then even as you look throughout the entire biblical narrative, from the very beginning of the story, you see God using a consistent picture to illustrate our dependence on him and how he wants for us to relate to him. I'm going to jump into the conversation between Jesus and this woman because inside of this conversation, Jesus again uses this illustration. It says this, it says, when a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus was sitting beside this well. Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." She's like, "We don't get along. I don't know why you're talking to me. You probably shouldn't be talking to me. Maybe you don't know that you shouldn't be talking to me, but you shouldn't be." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it was that asked you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." This is the first place we see Jesus start to paint this picture. And he's using this illustration to talk about our dependence on or the way that we relate to him. He says he would have given you living water. He's talking about himself. "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water?" She's like, "You don't even have a bucket." At this point, she's thinking something's probably off with this guy. First of all, he shouldn't be talking to me. He is talking to me. He doesn't have anything to get any water out. I don't know what's going to happen here. But what are you talking about? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his flocks and his herds?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." And in this moment, Jesus shares this picture. He shares this picture, this illustration that has been used actually throughout the entire scripture. When you go back to the Old Testament, you'll actually see, or the Jewish scriptures, you'll actually see that this idea of God being water, that's our dependence on him, was used throughout his conversation with the nation of Israel. So oftentimes he talks about how they're trying to find water in other things instead of being refreshed by, instead of being satisfied by him, and he's calling them back to him being their source of water. And consistently, as God relates to us, he says, I want for you to think about your and I's relationship. I want for you to think about your need for me or your dependence on me the way that you think about water. Now, for some of you, you understand that because you're healthy and you drink water. For others of you, you're like me, and sometimes you fall into the trap of believing you can just survive on coffee and the water that you get out of that, and you're not healthy. And so you don't have an adequate understanding of this, except for the fact that most of us, I think almost all of us understand, we would be a lot more healthy if we drank more water. Right? Every time we hear someone talk about the benefits of water, all of us are like, yeah, I know. Can I get a double latte, please? But we understand this, and God uses really this fundamental aspect of life. We understand we can't live without water. You know that. I know that. We can't live without water. And throughout God's interaction with us, he consistently refers to himself and calls us back to this idea that he is, in fact, the water to our souls. And that if we want to know satisfaction, if we want to know what it is to no longer thirst, and make no mistake about it, we live in a world that's constantly thirsty. We live our lives constantly thirsty, and we chase all these other things that will satisfy. We chase all these other things to, in some way, shape, or form, quench that thirst. And God over and over again is saying, no. I am that water. And in the same way that you're dependent on water to live, you're dependent on me to be able to thrive spiritually. You're dependent on me to live. And the early church understood this. They understood because Jesus had taught them. Another place where Jesus talks about a similar idea is in John chapter 15, where it says, I'm the vine and you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Jesus had taught his disciples this, so his disciples understood. And if you understand how vines and branches work, well, what is it that the vine passes on to the branches? Well, it passes on water. And Jesus says, you need to understand something. You are so completely dependent on me. Apart from me, you can do nothing. You have to abide in me. You have to constantly drink from me. You have to constantly experience me if it is that you're going to thrive, if it is that you're going to bear much fruit, if it is that you're going to live. And the early church, they understood this idea. You know, he's our water. And so when the church launched, it launched around this idea. It launched around, this is important in the way that you think about church, because the early church didn't start as an organization. When Jesus goes back to be with the Father and the Spirit comes on the day of Pentecost and the church launches, it didn't launch as an organization. And the disciples didn't sit down and say, okay, well, what's the most efficient way to be able to operate and run this organization? That's not how it started. That's not what drove what they practiced. What drove what they practiced was an understanding of this and an understanding of the mission that they'd been given. Because Jesus had said to them, I want you to go and I want you to share this message with the entire world. I want you to make disciples everywhere that you go, introducing people to me, helping them to live this. And so as they understood that, they began to practice something. Acts chapter 2, this is right after the church has started. They began to practice something. It says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. So Jesus goes back and the church finds themselves there. And again, they're not an organization. Don't think about the church that way. Don't think about the beginning of the church that way. They didn't view themselves that way. They viewed themselves as individuals, and really spiritual individuals who had been brought back to life. A group of people who spiritually had been brought back to life, who now understood that their health and that their life depended upon their abiding in Him. And so therefore, they began to practice these things. They began to gather in the temple courts. They began to gather in their homes. And there were certain practices that they were carrying out inside of those places. Why? Because it was the right thing to do? No. Why? Because that's what churches do. No, there weren't churches before this. Why did they do this? Why did they practice this? Well, it's because of the fact that they understood. No, He is the water. He's the vine. We're the branches. If we don't abide in Him, we can't carry this out. And if we're going to introduce people to that, and if we're going to invite people into that, then we have to have a space in which we're able to do that. We have to have a way in which we're doing that. And we understand that we do this better together as opposed to individually. And they were beginning to learn about the gifts that God had given them, the spiritual gifts, and how they work together in that. And so they said, well, this is what we need to do, or this is how we're going to function. And early on at Hoboken Grace, as a matter of fact, in the first year of Hoboken Grace, I gave a conversation called Wells. I've only given the conversation once, actually, but it was incredibly formational in what Hoboken Grace became. As a matter of fact, there were maybe 2 of you here. Justin may have been here for that. Don't go back and listen to it. Don't go back to listen to anything before year 3 here at Hoboken Grace. It's not good, I'm telling you. It is only by the grace of God that Hoboken Grace exists. I can tell you that right now. But we talked through this, and we talked through the beginning of the early church, and we laid out this picture of what I really believe the early church began to do, and what I think God calls us to do as a church, and that is this. The early church looked at it and said, okay, how do we create wells? In other words, how do we create spaces in which people can encounter God? How do we create spaces and situations in which people can drink deeply of Him and we can invite others into that with us? And so they gathered in the temple, and it's likely they began with gathering in the temple because of the fact that that's what they had done. Most of them were Jewish, and so that's kind of what they did. And they're like, well, let's do that, but let's talk about who Jesus is and what Jesus has done. And it's a space in which we can teach really well, and we can introduce people to this. And so they began to practice that. And they realized, okay, no, we're abiding in Him well in this. But then they understood the importance of community, and so they're meeting in homes, and they understood, okay, wow, we're really experiencing God, and we're drinking deeply of Him. We're introducing people well to Him through this. And they began to develop wells. In other words, spaces or places, situations in which people can drink deeply of the one who loves them most, understanding that we are completely dependent on Him. And as you walk through Scripture, there are multiple ways that God says that we can drink deeply of Him, and multiple tools that God says we can use to introduce others to Him. And as the church continues to move forward, they begin to understand these wells, if you will. And so they begin to instruct one another, and the disciples begin to instruct the church in how to be able to do that well, pun intended. And how to be able to really live that out as they move forward. And so as we stepped into existence at Hoboken Grace, well, we asked ourselves this question. And this continues to be a question that we ask over and over and over again here at Hoboken Grace, and that is this: are people drinking deeply In other words, are people experiencing God in what it is that we're doing? Are we creating wells? We don't want to just create programs. Programs are pointless. That's not the goal. We don't want to just, and churches can become about all sorts of different things. Churches can become about knowing about God instead of actually knowing God. And I've been to churches that knew a lot about God, but there wasn't a lot of experience of God, and there wasn't a lot of drinking deeply of him. And it's easy for a church to become about that. It's easy for a church to become about morality. And we're really good and we're better than everyone else. And look at us and look at how we have it all together, but it's not at all a well. As a matter of fact, you walk in and it feels very, very, very dry. Churches can become about religion and look at what we're doing for God and we're earning our way back to him and look at how we're proving ourselves to him. But again, it's not a well. It's dry. And so we're constantly asking ourselves this question, okay, are people, not just is a program good? Who cares if a program's good? Are people actually drinking deeply of him? Are they experiencing God? Are they able, through what it is that we're creating and what it is that we're doing, are they able to abide in him? And understanding this in connection with the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, well, as we set out to plant Hoboken Grace, we set out to plant and to sink some wells that we knew were significant because of the fact that as the disciples instructed that early church, there were certain things that they pointed their attention to and said, no, you need to understand something. This is one of the ways that you really experience God. And so for us as Hoboken Grace, we set out to begin to develop several of these that we understood were important. One of the things that you see throughout the early church that they never leave behind is the gathering in the temple and the understanding and the interaction of worship and how we experience God, how we abide in God through worship. And so we set out to sink that well. We wanted to be able to lead people to encounter God collectively and love him responsibly. We wanted for us to be able to come together and not just to come together, but actually to actually instruct people and teach people how to encounter God through this, which is why sometimes you've seen me walk up on stage and say, hey, listen, okay, we're just going through the motions here. We're shutting this thing down if we're just going through the motions here because that's not what this is about. What is it about? Well, it's about encountering God collectively, loving him responsibly, and we understand that this is an incredible tool to invite other people into this. And so we say, okay, we've got to sink that well, and we want to establish that well, and we want to do that really, really well. In addition to that, we understood, because God doesn't just say, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. He also talks about the importance of making disciples in the Great Commission. And so we understood connection. We wanted to lead people to encounter God through one another. So not only do we want them to encounter God collectively and love him responsibly, but we wanted them to encounter God in one another. And understanding this, that the scriptures actually teach that when you step into this relationship with him, that the Spirit of God actually lives within you. And this is really important. Let me just touch on this really quickly, because some of you are new here at Hoboken Grace. You're sorting through this whole Jesus thing and whether you can trust him and what this is about. You have to understand, for us, this is not about a religion, it's about a relationship. And we believe that God not only knows you, but he wants to be known by you. And he wants for you to step into a relationship with him. And when we talk about experiencing him and abiding him, we actually believe that Jesus gave his life so that God's Spirit would be with you at all times, no matter where you are. And we don't think you earn this by being really good. We don't think that in some way, shape, or form, you're special and so you get this. No, we believe that Jesus made this possible for you. It doesn't matter where you are, where you've been, or what you've done. But you have to trust him that he loves you that way. He's not going to force it on you. You have to accept that from him. But I want you to know he wants for you to experience that in him. And everything that we do is driven to be able to, as we say, help people find their way back to God. Well, what's that about? It's about abiding in him. It's about growing closer to him. It's about drinking deeply of him. And the scriptures say, no, the Spirit of God lives in each and every one of us. And so therefore, one of the primary ways that I experience God is actually through experiencing his body. It's through experiencing one another. It's inside of connection and community. And so we wanted to be able to sink that well and teach people how to be able to do that. In addition to that, not only are we supposed to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, but we're supposed to love one another that way. And throughout the New Testament church, you see them learning about gifts and how God has gifted us in these different ways, not for ourselves, but so that we can serve one another. And so that we can love one another through ministry or impact. And so we want to lead people to encounter God as they give their lives to serve one another. This is another well that we want to sink, and we want for people to be able to drink deeply in that way. And to understand that your greatest experience of God's love, and listen to me, for those of you who are here and you're being served, you're constantly being served, but you're not serving. Some of you think that you're actually benefiting in that situation. You're not. Your greatest experience of God's love is not when you receive it, it's actually when you give it away. 1 John says you actually complete God's love, you perfect God's love, you bring to its climax God's love, not when you receive it, but when you give it away. And one of the greatest wells that we have is when we serve one another. We drink deeply, we abide in him, we experience him as we serve one another. We want to be able to sink that well. In addition to that, we want to sink the well of growth and leading people to encounter God personally in their daily lives. And as we've walked through the years, we've developed rhythms here at Hoboken Grace. This is primarily one of the ways in terms of our individual experience that we do this, that we encounter God personally in our daily lives. And we wanted to sink that well. We wanted to teach people how to do that and establish that inside of our community. And then outreach as well, our sharing of God with those around us. And you say, well, that's about sharing with the other person. It's actually about both. It's about the person that you're sharing with, but it's also an incredible experience of God as you're doing that. And so leading people to translate their encounter of God and experience him as they share that with others. So helping people to be able to work through, okay, how do I share my story and how do I experience God in that? I don't know if you've had the opportunity to really sit down and share your story with someone or to really walk someone through what Jesus has done for them. It is an incredible experience of God in that moment. It's another one of those wells. And the reason that I share that is this. I think for many of us, we think about these things and we think about what we do here and we think programs. And well, the church has these different programs, but it's very important that our thinking shifts in that because again, if the program doesn't actually provide the water, then the program has to stop. And we need to find something. We need to sink another well. And there are times where the well dries up. And typically it revolves around these things that we've talked about, but the program no longer actually results in connection, or the program no longer actually results in growth, or the program, what needs to drive us constantly, it's a mindset shift. What needs to drive us constantly is the idea of wells. Okay, are people abiding in him? Are we able to drink deeply in these different ways? So that we can thrive. And so that we can introduce others to that and invite others into that. It's crucial that we think this way. And for years here at Hoboken Grace, we've been working to sink these wells. And we've worked as hard as we can to figure out, okay, what does that look like inside of our culture? And we work through connection and worship, and how does this work in our daily lives, especially in a place that's so busy? And what does it look like to drink deeply in these ways? And the amazing thing is that thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people have actually experienced those wells. And they've drunk deeply from those wells. It's been amazing. It's been amazing to see what God's done and how God has moved. But then about a year ago, those wells shifted. It wasn't that they necessarily disappeared. I would actually say that we probably had to resink some wells, or we had to sink some new wells, because all of a sudden, when it came to the way that we experience God corporately, the way that we experience God in community, all of a sudden things shifted and it wasn't able to be, or we decided that it wasn't going to be the way that it used to be, or the way that we used to function. And we had to figure out, okay, well, how do we help people drink knowing this new situation and as we engage this new situation? And I want to be very clear about this, because this is important. And I've said this multiple times throughout the year, but I don't know that I can say this enough. As you go back to last year and our decision not to meet in person in this way, or not to meet inside of groups, I want to be very clear about this. We did not make that decision because we were afraid and decided to put the mission on hold. I want to be super clear about this. We did not decide, well, the mission's not that important, and we're afraid, and so therefore we're going to put this on hold until we're not afraid anymore, and then we'll start to engage the mission again. No. The mission never comes second to anything. And our entire story, we go back to last week, we talk about the cloud of witnesses that have come before us. The entire story of the church is filled with people who moved through some of the most fearful circumstances to be able to communicate the message of Jesus to the world around them. And those who gave us the scripture, most of them died, and they knew they were going to die because of the fact that they shared the message of Jesus. But we don't make decisions based on self-preservation. That's not who we are. We talked about this months ago, and we talked about leaning in. We are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who lean in. And we didn't make the decision because we were afraid and decided to put the mission on hold. As a matter of fact, we looked at it, and as we prayed through it, engaged it, we decided, no, I think that the best way to be able to advance the mission is to be able to make a responsible decision in this moment. And so we're going to shift, and we're going to sink a new well, understanding that our old well is going to be out of commission for a little while. And I want to be very clear about that, because I don't want for the last year to factor into, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm afraid to be a missionary there because I don't know. It might cost me my life. Yeah, it might. And that doesn't mean in any way, shape, or form that you shouldn't go. That's not how we make decisions. We always make the decision based on the mission. As we looked at it, we said, okay, based on the mission, we think that we're going to have to sink a new well. And so we realized, okay, we're going to have to take our online experience to an entirely new level. We're going to take our groups, we're going to shift those, and they're going to have to look differently, and we're going to have to build into this differently because of the fact that, and again, I can't say it enough, we make decisions based on our mission. Go ahead and bring that up here, Casey. We make decisions based on our mission, and so we shifted. And it was incredible, and it was amazing, and we had the lawn, and we had services, and we tried, and we were thinking, what were we doing? Were we trying to create programs? No. What we were trying to do is we were trying to sink wells. To figure out, okay, how do we drink deeply in these different ways? And as we move through this moment, we took rhythms to an entirely different level. And Anthony and I, the whole reason that Anthony and I went online in the mornings is because of the fact that we wanted to create another well and for people to be able to drink deeply and for people to experience God in another way. It's all driven by this same understanding that, no, He's the living water. He's the vine. We're the branches. We have to remain in Him. And it was incredible. It was amazing. As a matter of fact, we have people joining us and that walk with us on a weekly basis from around the world. Inside of our groups here on Sundays, it's been incredible. But then a couple months ago, we came back in person. And some of you were here for that first service. And I remember thinking, I'm not sure what it's going to be like when we come back in person, especially because of the fact that we're all going to have masks on, and I didn't know what it was going to be like to sing through a mask. It was hard for like the first couple of weeks. After that, you just got used to it, didn't you? And we decided, okay, we're going to do this, and we stepped back, in person. I remember being a part of that first service, and I remember sitting there and thinking, wait. This is different. This is different. And I really didn't. I didn't know what it was going to be like, but I remember walking back in, and as I sat there and I was sitting down here in front, we were working through that first service, and I remember thinking, okay, I did not expect for it to be this different. And I really didn't. I didn't expect for it to be that different. And it's interesting for me because you guys sit through services a lot. I sit through like 4 services a year. So it's very different for me than it is for you. But even with that, I remember thinking, it's different. And not different like, I really like to sing hymns. I like to go, like not different like I'm nostalgic, different. Like this was different. And that's very important because this isn't different like I like that better. No, it goes back to drinking. It goes back to experience. It goes back to abiding. And I said, this is different in terms of drinking him in. I was working through it with our team this week, and I said it this way. I said it's kind of the equivalent of this. I feel like we moved through the past year, and we had our online experience, and it was good. I mean, it was really good. As a matter of fact, it was great, and you could drink, and it sustained us. It was really good, and it was really helpful. But I walked into that first service. And some of you were here for that first service. Everybody was crying. It was crazy. And I remember I was crying too. And even people who don't cry, like Vinny, our financial stewardship pastor, like he never cries. He's the most emotionless person I know. He was bawling. And it was crazy. But I remember walking to that first service and I was like, okay, this is kind of what it's been like. But I felt like, and some of you may share the same thing. I felt like I walked in, and it was like, all of a sudden, we didn't take the lid off. We got to do that next time. But I did. I walked in, and all of a sudden, it was like this. It was like finding an oasis in the middle of a desert. And I sat there, and as the service went on, it just kept going and going and going and going and going. And there's so much to understanding this because, as we said, we understand that there's an experience of God in worship. That, man, the band did an amazing job when we were online, didn't they? Didn't they? But there's an experience of God in worship online. And then there's an experience of God in worship when we're together. It's not the same. Why? Well, because the Spirit of God lives in you. This isn't just like an experience like, oh, I felt something thing. There's fundamental understandings of how God works in this. The Spirit of God lives in you and you and you and you and you. And when we come together to be able to celebrate and love him together, there's an experience of God in that. That's powerful. There's spirits of God when we work through a scripture together and we understand that, no, we're in this together and God's doing something powerful and moving in the lives, not only in my own life, but moving in the lives of the people around me. There's an experience of God in connection as we're able to say hello to one another in the hallways. There's an experience of God in that, and we understand that if we're going to drink deeply, well, we can't just drink from any one of those things. We have to drink from all of them. And this is why, by the way, this is why we're constantly calling you to these different wells. Why? Because we want you to be involved in programs? No. Because you're healthier when you're drinking from all of the wells. You're healthier when you're consistently drinking. Again, going back, we understand this. You understand this in your life. Hopefully you're getting your 8 glasses of water. There's like 2 of you here who are. But But you understand that you would be healthier if you were. And as we call you to these, it's because of the fact that we want for you to be able to experience that. And so as we look towards Easter and you say, well, why are we doing this? It's because of the fact that we believe that it's time to resync this well. And to be able to establish this in more of our church family. Our team has done an incredible job of showing that it's a safe space to be able to do this, that this is a responsible decision to make. And so as we look at this, we want to invite you. I want to invite you to engage others. And I know as I walk through this message was primarily written for those who are watching online. You understand that? I understand that. I understand. I'm preaching to the choir. You guys are like, we're here. What are you talking about? Like, I've been here the whole time. What do you mean? But listen to me. I think it's important for our church in the way that we think about this, and also the way that you engage others about it. And why is it that we want for people to come back together? Because we want for people to abide better. We want for people to drink deeper. We want for us to be able to experience God in this way together, and not just here on Sundays. One of the other things that we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks is that we're going to be reopening the lawn. Now, some of you are very excited about me saying that. Some of you are not going to be excited about what I have to say next. Because here's the thing. We are reopening the lawn, and we are not doing Sunday services there. Now, here's why. I told you, some of you are going to be very excited when I said it, and some of you are very upset with me after I said it. Because here's why. We can do that really well here. We can do that really well here. And we want to be able to bring people back into this space and into this experience of God, and to be able to drink deeply of that well here. So you say, well, why are we reopening the lawn? As we reopen the lawn, we're going to do it very differently. As a matter of fact, there's going to be seating areas all over the lawn, 4 or 5 different seating areas. Why? Because we don't want to just come back together on Sundays. We want our groups back in person. And we want for you to be able to experience community in those groups in person. Why? Because it's different. And online groups are great, and they're still going to be available. Listen to me, we're not stopping our online services. We're not stopping online groups. It's still going to be available, and for some people, that's the only option. It's the only thing that they can be a part of. We want to be able to love them, and as you travel, we want for you to be able to experience that. But we understand that, no, this is a deeper well. And we want for you to be able to experience that. And it's all driven by an understanding that, no, He is the vine, we are the branches. We have to abide in Him. We have to abide in Him. And so as we move through the next few weeks, I want to ask you to do a couple things. As a matter of fact, the first one I want to ask you to do right now. I don't have my phone on me, but you have your phone on you. I know that you do. So here's what I want for you to do. First things first. I want you to pull out your phone, open up the app. Go ahead. It has a light on it. I can see which ones of you are doing it or not doing it. I can see your faces better than you think. So pull out your app, and then if you open up the app, you're going to see that Easter is on the top of that, on the top of our homepage. The first thing I want you to do is this. I want for you to register for Easter right now. Choose your service. Now, if you're consistently coming here, I ask you, if you don't have someone who's attending with you, hopefully you will have someone who's attending with you, then come to whatever service time is best for them. But one of the things that we understand is that the 10:30, the 9 o'clock service are going to fill up fast. As a matter of fact, 10:30 might already be full because of the fact that people in our community, that's going to be naturally the service that they choose. And so we ask for you to serve them by choosing one of the Saturday evening services or the early Sunday morning service or the late Sunday service. I think the 1 o'clock is our last service that day. And so I ask you to go ahead and step into that, register for that right now. The second thing that I want to ask you to do, I'm going to ask you to register for 2 things. So the second thing that I want to ask you to do, and this is a whole nother well. We're talking about outreach now and what we're doing with our Easter egg hunt and what's happening with our Easter egg hunt. But I want for you also to, as you scroll down, you're going to see Easter egg hunt. I want for you to go ahead and register to volunteer for that Easter egg hunt. So two next steps today. 1, register for Easter. Go ahead and do it right now. It's not going to take you very long. Very easy to do. Number 2, register for the Easter egg hunt. Now, let me talk about the Easter egg hunt really quickly. Because some of you, as you've engaged with this, you've said, well, I don't know. Because you're picturing our previous Easter egg hunts. And you're like, that doesn't seem safe. That seems crazy. It wasn't safe when we did it before. How could it be safe now? I thought kids were going to die. I want to show you, Casey, do we have that? I want to show you what we're doing with the Easter egg hunt this year so that you can understand, as you're inviting people to it, so that you can communicate what we're doing, or if people in the community have questions about it. So the Easter egg hunt is going to work very differently. So we're going to have about 500. We actually don't think it'll be 500 registered per hour. We expect it'll probably be closer to 300 based on our no-show rate, which is the same with services, by the way, for those of you who register and don't show up. But here's how it's going to work. As people arrive, they're going to come through the gate just like they used to do. And as they work through here, crafts are just going to be something that we hand them. So they're going to receive crafts in a bag so that they can do those at home. It's all going to be prepared for them. But they're not going to sit down at a table right next to each other to be able to do those crafts. They're going to make their way through this. And as they make their way around the field, there are going to be different things that they can take photos with, and people there to be able to clean those areas as well as they make their way through. It's going to be pretty much a consistently moving space so that we don't have groups congregating as you move through it. As they get to the other side, there's going to be a couple of different lines that they can fall into based on whether they're single families or based on whether they're quarantine groups. And so some families will come and it's just them, or some families will come with another family or two other families, and so they'll go into the quarantine group. And then you see these yellow areas. So our team is creating, I believe it's 6, man, I'm not very good at math, 15. So our team is creating 15 individual hunt areas so that these families, as they come through, they'll be assigned to one of these hunt areas, and then they'll be able to go there, and we'll have the eggs set up. They'll be able to hunt in that area, and then they'll leave that area, and then we'll have a team that comes in behind them and gets everything ready for the next family to be able to move into that space. And so they'll hunt in these. I know for some of you, you're like, I'm not volunteering for that. There's 3,000 people crammed in this little. It's a very different experience, but an unbelievably safe experience. And so as they come out of there, then they're going to come into. They can exit at that point if they want, or they can come to be able to take pictures with the bunny. Now, we're not going to have everybody hugging on the bunny, right? You understand that? We understand that. Some of you used to be bunnies in the past. You're very sad because it's your most loved day of the year. I know that. But we knew we couldn't do that this year. And so we're going to have areas where they sit down, the bunny's going to be behind them, and they're going to be able to take the picture. It's going to look like they're with the bunny, and the bunny will be a little ways behind them, right? It's going to be set up like that, and then they're going to be able to make their way out. Now, did our team do an amazing job with this or what? Incredible job that they did with laying this out and putting together a really safe experience. And so as you look at this, you understand, no, I can be a part of that. I can volunteer, help us to be able to love our city well through this. And it goes back to just what we talked about. Well, why are we doing this? Well, because the early church was moved by two things: to be able to abide in him and to be able to carry out that mission. And as you look at this accomplishes both of them. This accomplishes both of them, because as you walk through this day, I often say the Easter egg hunt's one of the best days of the year here at Hoboken Grace. It's one of the days of my year where I experience God most. Because of the way that we're able to love our city, and we're able to do that with him together, and to see him use you in that way is powerful. It's powerful. And this accomplishes both of those. It allows us to be able to drink deeply of him ourselves. It's another one of those wells, but then also it allows us to be able to invite others into it with us. And so I want to ask you today, two steps. Every one of us. And this is an all hands on deck thing. Easter and the Easter egg hunt are all hands on deck. Every one of us. From the beginning of Hoboken Grace, we've asked, what could God do? What could God do with 5 people sold out to him? What could God do with 20 people sold out to him? That's about how many people were there the last time I talked through Wells. What could God do with 1,000 people sold out to him? What could God, we've just been asking that question over and over again. But it takes all of us together to be able to live out what he's called us into. And so I want to invite you today to take those 2 steps. Decide, okay, no, I'm going to register for Easter. I'm inviting someone to come along with me. And then I'm going to register to be a part of that hunt. There's 2 different hunt areas. So if you have kids, you're like, I don't think I can be a part of it. Yes, you can. Leave your kids with your husband. Leave your kids with your wife. Go serve at it. And then come back and switch or take them to the other one, whatever it is. Me and Anna do it all the time. How are you going to be a part of this Easter? Is it about programs? No. Never been about programs. It's about abiding in him, drinking deeply of him. Will you pray with me? Father, I pray that today we as a family would step into this, that we would understand that we're not just an organization that does programs, that we are individuals who've been brought back to life, understand our necessity, our dependence on you, and want to be able to sink those wells as best as we can for more and more to drink deeply of you. In Jesus' name, amen.